All right. Well, Wavelengths is slowly turning into The Office without Michael Scott. I'm the replacement to the replacement now, Theo Bachman, filling in as the host of Wavelengths. I'm here with the football analyst, Bryce, Jackson
What's
Elliott,
up?
and X. Say what's up, guys.
How we doing?
So
What's going on?
since the last time we talked, there's been some big stuff going on. James Harden has suited up and played for the Philadelphia 76ers, which I say has had a big impact on the NBA landscape. So I just want to hear what your guys' takeaways have been from Harden's first two games with the Sixers and what you think it means for the East going forward.
Theo, shout out to you for being the replacement to the replacement. But getting the Avengers for your first show, really good work, man. This is a really all-star cast. I'm excited to be here. I haven't been here in a long time. I got to climb up the rankings on the Wavelengths report card there. So it's nice to be back. But to answer your question about James Harden, look, this fit is weird. Let's just be totally honest. Daryl Morey said James Harden is a basketball genius. This is a perfect partner. I disagree with that. I do not think Joel Embiid is necessarily James Harden's perfect companion, but what they do have in common is this ability to draw free throws at a rate that is just stupid. Joel Embiid is second in history right now in free throws per minute. In the history of the league, Joel Embiid is in the top three of that stat. What is going on? These guys coming into the season, we're calling less fouls, and now all of a sudden we're kind of back to the way it was a little bit last year. Maybe not necessarily at that rate, but still, Embiid, the way he plays is so physical, and he plays like this big guard sometimes at the perimeter. He draws fouls like no other, and then you have James Harden, who that's kind of his MO right now, is just being able to get to the free throw line because his shooting stats still aren't the best right now this season. He's still a little down. He's getting up there in age, but regardless, what he can do is play make at a high level. Those two guys together are going to put a lot of pressure on defenses, especially good defenses. Let's say they played the Boston Celtics in a playoff series, right? Boston's entire thing is being great on defense. That'd be a tough series for them because if their good players got into foul trouble, their offense is lagging behind their defense quite a bit. Statistically, it would be hard for them to catch up points wise, especially with the top players on the bench in foul trouble. It's going to put a lot of pressure on other teams, but here's the thing. In the playoffs, you see a lot of those calls not get called the same way. You see the game slow down a bit. We've seen Embiid not be able to stay healthy for multiple rounds in a row. It's going to be interesting because both these guys are big injury risks. Both their games rely heavily on something that not necessarily is in their control. Obviously, you can draw fouls, but especially in the playoffs, refs get a little weird with what they call and whatnot. So it's going to be interesting to see how high this ceiling is for these two. But right now, the two games they've played, the Knicks and the Timberwolves, they've looked dominant in both.
Yeah, for sure. I would agree. I think even as we have the game on right now, Embiid has six. We were talking at the beginning, Theo. Embiid has six free throws already attempted in the first quarter of the game. The first quarter is not even over yet. So I'd certainly agree on that. I also think it's provided some opportunities from other players. Maxi's averaging 24 and a half in these past two games. So I would agree that it's weird, but we have a small sample size, but I think it certainly mixes up the East, but I think it also mixes up for the Nets as well, considering, they're struggling. Simmons still isn't playing. So that could be a potentially, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 seeded Nets team. And then once they're fully healthy, that would be a dangerous team that, one of those top seeds wouldn't want to play.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, the free throws, they're free points. That's what it is. Like you can wear teams down, and not only that, like the Knicks, Jericho Sims and Mitchell Robinson, they combined for 36 minutes and they both fouled out. Like 12 fouls in 36 minutes. They're gonna wear through teams' big man rotations, and then you're putting like backup bigs on Embiid, and not only that, but you're having backup bigs in action covering the Embiid Harden pick and roll with like an inexperienced player in that situation. It's a nightmare. Uh, so sticking with Embiid, he's the current MVP favorite. I wanted to kind of go through the MVP odds and determine like how many guys still have a chance to win this award. So stop me when you think that the player has no chance of winning the MVP. So we have Embiid first, obviously. Jokic, I think, is still in it. Uh, Giannis is in it. We got DeRozan, John Morant, Steph Curry,
Stop.
Devin Booker, John Morant's it.
John Morant's the line. Curry, I feel like after the first month of the season, We do this in every sport. We always have that guy we like. I love Steph Curry. A lot of people love Steph Curry, whatnot. But we always have this guy in sports where after the first month, we're like, okay, he's the MVP. And then like we forget the next 2 months about everything because, he's just the MVP. And that's kind of how it was with Steph this year. Steph has not been that great this year. I mean, Steph's obviously a phenomenal player, still top 10 in the league. Don't get me wrong. But compared to other Steph seasons of the past, this is kind of a weird down year for him shooting the basketball. So I think Steph has no chance. The Warriors without Draymond Green are nearly 500. It just feels like Ja is that line. After that, it takes a real, step down. I don't even think Steph is next after that. I'd start going with guys like, I don't even know, Jason Tatum, who is
you got
leading the
Luka
NBA.
too.
Yeah, I was going to say
below
Luka
Steph.
next, of course. Tatum's leading the league in defensive rating for wings. Luka obviously probably ahead of Tatum as well. Just really phenomenal work he's done the last few weeks. LeBron, even, I know his team's terrible, but if he wasn't on that team, yikes, the Lakers are awful. I mean, LeBron has literally dragged them the last few weeks. It's been impressive what he's been able to do at age 37. But I think it's a close race, but those 4 or 5 guys that you mentioned, I think, are a clear upper echelon than everyone else.
I would say it's more of, I think we'll probably touch on this a little bit, but it's at least more of the race than some of the other awards. I'm sure we'll get into that, but I think even for me, the lines before Morant, I like what he's doing a lot, but I think compared to the others, it's not nearly like close enough. I think it's really just those top 4 guys you mentioned, Theo, that even have a chance. But Embiid's the favorite for me still.
Mm-hmm. You got anything on that, Bryce?
I was just saying, I think this, top 5 race is a lot closer than it's been in years past when guys like KD, LeBron won it. Those guys just blew everyone else so out of the water. And I think this, even the top 3 is closer than people really imagine it is.
Mm-hmm. And especially, I think 2 weeks from now, we have Embiid and Jokic in Philly on a Monday night. Like getting the top 2 MVP candidates at the same position,
that's
like facing off. I think that's a great game. It's just a great year for the MVP narrative. And like Ja's on the outside, but I think his narrative's really taking off. Like he just scored 50 points. He was all over the place. So I was just wondering if there's any other guys you think that like narrative driven can come into the spotlight in the last 20 games here.
I don't know what Isaiah Thomas's MVP odds are right now, but I feel like it's the Fast and the Furious movies. I don't even know what number we're on anymore. I feel like we haven't asked for the last 5 Isaiah Thomas returns. He's playing again tonight, just signed a 10-day with the Charlotte Hornets. I don't know why I'm bringing this up, but it's one of those things that like would have fall from grace because it's always interesting to see every year that one of these guys is probably not going to be that good in a few years, right? There's always this guy that's going to be in the top 5 of MVP voting this year. Maybe it's going to be DeRozan. I'm sure that turnaround jumper that he's shooting a ridiculous amount on right now when he gets up there in age might not be as effective. But just think about how the league's changed the last few years where Isaiah Thomas is on his 87th stint after being a top 5 MVP candidate not that long ago. And now, another 10-day contract, another Fast and the Furious movie, if you will. But to answer your question, I think it's only Ja. I think Luka has a really outside chance. I wasn't necessarily sure how this fit with Jason Kidd was going to work. It feels like even in despite of some of what he's done as a coach earlier in the year, Luka's just Luka. And it really has helped that this guard lineup that they've been going out with Brunson, Doncic, and Dinwiddie has really worked for them the last few games. It's going to be interesting to see in a playoff series how teams really adapt to that. They're 30th in pace right now. I think that's the only concern for them is that maybe they're not getting these cheap points that other teams are able to in transition in a really fast league that the NBA is right now. But to answer your question, I just really don't think outside of Luka, it'd have to take a monumental stretch, like averaging 35 for a month or something like that, and really just willing the Mavericks to a top 3 seed. But I feel like it's kind of set in stone. It's those 4 or 5 guys. It's just a matter of preference. I think right now the media narrative is for Embiid and for Ja. I'm not necessarily saying they're top 2, but I think the media is in favor of those 2 guys. The interesting thing is, if I had a vote today, I think I'd vote Jokic for back-to-back MVP. The issue is he's playing in a Western Conference. Denver isn't necessarily a big market. They're not on national television a lot without Jamal Murray. The team has a lot of variance. I mean, they rely on a lot of these wing guys to do things that are kind of above their pay grade on any given night, and it works for now. But I could see Denver at any moment just kind of go to a tailspin. So it's going to be interesting to see. But I think right now, if I had to like give you the top three, who's going to be there at the end of the day, I think it's going to be Ja, Embiid, and Jokic. That's not any discredit to a guy like DeMar DeRozan, who I think easily deserves it. That's not a discredit to Giannis. I just think the media is tired of Giannis because he went back-to-back a few years ago. And I don't know why. I think people are like less impressed with what he's doing. That's fine. And then DeRozan, I think he's a phenomenal story, but I think his defense, the Bulls not necessarily playing super well as of late, despite them being high in the standings still, they have taken a little step back as of late with injuries and whatnot. And just the fact that I feel like everyone has a preconceived notion of what DeMar DeRozan was. So I think it's weird for a guy who everyone thought they kind of had covered to now be the MVP of the league. I think that's too big of a jump for some people to make.
I think that almost makes it even more of a case for me personally for Billy Donovan being coach of the year, because
I totally agree with that. Yeah.
yeah. So, like you said, exactly with DeRozan, I think, but he's still doing such great things. Levine's missing games, whatever, but this well-crafted team is still, even with the slip, still being high in the standings. Still, I think people had a lot of, this could be a 4, 5, 6 seed at the beginning of the year. And even now they're pushing maybe past that. And so for me, I would agree, as much as I would love DeMar to get it. I've always kind of loved him, but I think the kind of overarching theme, and you touched on it perfectly, is for me, Billy Donovan has to be coach of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Just to add to that Bulls point, I didn't expect them to be this good so fast. Like, they got a really good team through last year's deadline and this year's free agency, but I didn't expect them to be fighting for the number one seed like in year one. I thought they would need a little time to gel first.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is important to mention with the Bulls. So right now, these standings, as of recording this, are really jam-packed in the top 6. So it's Miami, they're 2 games ahead of Chicago. Philly's 1 game back of Chicago, 3 games back of the lead. Milwaukee's 2 games back of Chicago, 4 back of the lead. And then Boston and Cleveland are going to be about 5 games back when today's done, and only 3 games back of Chicago. Chicago's upcoming schedule is brutal. So this beautiful story could come to a really screeching halt very soon. They play the Hawks on Thursday. They play the Bucks on Friday. Then they turn around and play the 76ers on Monday. The Pistons, who are weirdly playing competitive basketball as of late, on Wednesday. The Cavs next Saturday. That's a really tough 6-game stretch for the Bulls. And they only have a few games lead on that 5 and 6 spot. Just imagine if they lose a few of those games. Some of those other teams have easier schedules. This feels like Chicago could really take a step back, and the narrative on them can really change. Now, a lot of that depends on health of their players. Obviously, Caruso hasn't played in a long time. Lonzo as well. Levine's missed time. It's going to be hard for them to kind of get all their guys back and gel the way they did to start the season. But I think Chicago is an interesting team. I just don't think that at the end of the day, when they're probably going to slip down the standings a little bit, that DeRozan could be really taken seriously for an MVP candidacy.
Mm-hmm. All right, I have a question to kind of tie this awards conversation into the playoff conversation. And so MVP conversation aside, I want you guys to give me your best player in each conference right now. The best player in the East, best player in the West.
I think the best player in the East, when healthy, is Kevin Durant. I mean, I don't even think it'd be close if his foot wasn't so big. Just his foot being on the line really changed the entire narrative of the East. But I think right now, healthy, it's still probably Giannis Antetokounmpo. Now, the issue with Giannis is this. I want this to be totally clear. The Bucks have not played well at all since January 1st. The reason is Chris Middleton has taken at least a half step back. He was their closer last year in a lot of those playoff games. It kind of changed the narrative on him as a late game performer and just an overall basketball player in of itself. But if Giannis can't close games, can he really be the best player in the East? That's something that I've tried to battle with and tried to come up with a conclusion for. I still think he can be. I didn't think Shaq was this amazing player at the end of games during his 0-1 season or throughout his really great prime as a basketball player. So I still think it's Giannis. In the West, it's a little bit tougher. I think there's a lot of guys that on any given night can be the best player in the West. I think it's probably still LeBron when he's like fully healthy, if he is in the playoffs, if the Lakers are able to sneak in there. But outside of that, just in the field right now, I think it's Luka Doncic. And I don't think a lot of people are going to come up with that answer, but I think Luka just navigating the Mavs situation, his roster still isn't that good. And Luka on any given night, despite, his record-breaking statistics as far as how much he has the ball in his hands, how much he just dribbles on any given night, I still think he's so valuable to that Mavs team. He can create offense for others like no other, and he could score the basketball at such an amazing rate. So I'm going KD when healthy, when not Giannis, and then Luka or LeBron in the West.
I was actually drawn to agree with you. I was actually drawn to Luka as my first thought initially. I was watching that Mavericks Warriors game a couple days ago. They were down like 23 or something in the fourth quarter. And then it seemed like Luka just flipped a switch in his head and he took the game over completely. Mm-hmm. And I think that's similar to what LeBron can do again when healthy, but I don't see, Curry's incredible. And we all know that, but I think there was something about that when you're just watching the game and, they're playing against Curry and, clearly it didn't work out for them. And so for me, that's what I was immediately drawn to Luka as well. And I agree. I think it's not debatable that KD's the best player in the West when healthy. When you were talking X about, maybe Giannis can't close games, then I was like, okay, well, Embiid. And then I thought, well, Embiid couldn't really close maybe that was more Simmons than Embiid, but Embiid didn't really close anything against the Hawks either.
It's a big question mark for me with Embiid. In all these playoff series, he's always looked gassed in the fourth quarter of games. Like he's dominated and he's always disappeared. He's a dominant player, but he has to work on his conditioning and finish these playoff games before we put him in that level.
Exactly. And so I think for me, like just leaning towards that, I'm going to agree. But I also, to touch on the Bucks thing that you were talking about too, it's at least recently, it feels like they're leaning on Drew to be the second leading scorer, which I think he can do. He's a good player, but I've noticed Middleton gone completely ghost, not even half step back. I would full 1.5 steps back. And so I think that makes, we've talked about it a little bit. I think that makes the playoffs way more exciting this year. But so, yeah, basically to wrap it all up, I think I'm going to agree with you, X, on both those.
Yeah, for me, I would have to go with in the East, probably Giannis. I don't care if he's injured or what, he's still the best player in the league, in my opinion. Like what he's been able to do with, Chris Middleton taking 1.5 steps back, like Jackson mentioned, and Drew shooting just terribly, I think is just a testament to his game.
How about the West?
West, I have to go Doncic here. Like I forget who mentioned it earlier, but it's a closer race than the East. But I just think the way Luka's been playing since the year started just has to be him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like it was mentioned, the Mavs are 30th in pace, and like Luka has the ball all the time. Like he is controlling the games with this dribble. He is like seeking out mismatches, like hunting mismatches, really controlling games. It's been very impressive what he's done.
I don't care what you do, you can't really stop him either.
Mm-hmm. So, I'd probably go Durant in the East, and then I'll go Jokic in the West, just to give us something different here. But a lot of the players we mentioned are on lower seeded teams. Like Durant, the Nets are in the 8 seed. Giannis is mentioned, like the Bucks are the 4 seed. We got Dallas is the 5 seed in the West. Denver is the 6 seed. So there's a lot of really good players on lower seeded teams. And I think oftentimes in the playoffs, it is as simple as the team with the best player wins. So next I wanted to get into some potential playoff matchups and some potential upsets that you guys see out there.
I think a big upset, at least in the West, is Golden State's matchup. Right now it would be Minnesota, but obviously the Lakers are right there. The Clippers are right there. Who knows what the Clippers are going to have come playoff time. Denver, if they take a little bit of a tumble back, would be there as well. It may not be the first round for Golden State, but let's say they're only a half game up on Memphis right now. If they're the 3 seed and they play Denver, Golden State's biggest issue is defending the 5. Imagine if their first round matchup is playing Jokic. I don't think that would go very well for them. And especially if Murray comes back. I'm not expecting him to be super great, but I know Bones Highland has been pretty good the last few weeks, but Jamal Murray is substantially better than Bones Highland right now. So I think that is a obvious mismatch early in round one. Now, here's another one. If Dallas was to take a little bit of a stumble back these last few weeks and everything were to stay the same on top, Dallas and Memphis would be very interesting because I think that'd be a bad matchup for Memphis as well. As far as Luka just being able to control games, I think Memphis is very young. They're very inexperienced come playoff time. And I don't think necessarily they have someone that can stop Ja. And I don't think defensively Dallas is going to do anything to necessarily pose a threat to Memphis's offense. But I think Dallas's offense is such a big detriment to how Memphis plays defense and how they're so matchup driven. That could be a nightmare. Now in the East, it's a little bit different. I don't think there's necessarily as big of like obvious matchup concerns that I have right now. The only one I could point out is if Chicago played Boston in the first round. I think that'd be a very good matchup for Boston because how Vucevic has been playing. He's a little bit slower. Boston has good enough wings to kind of match up with Chicago. And the reason that is intriguing is because I think Tatum could play DeRozan pretty well, but I don't think DeRozan could play Tatum pretty well. And there's multiple examples of that. I think Derek White could play Levine fairly well. And I think Marcus Smart and him could do a good job, taking one at a time against Levine. I just feel like that would be a good matchup for Boston, probably the only good matchup for Boston in the first round that would give them an advantage over any higher seed. I don't think there's too many right now, the way the land sits, but if there's a little shuffling that I mentioned, there could be a few upsets with these teams that have kind of stagwarded recently. You look at Golden State, you look at Memphis, who we don't really trust yet. We don't really know what Memphis can be. We look at Milwaukee, we look at Chicago. Those are four teams that are obvious, like, okay, they could be on upset alert. It really depends on matchup and if they're legit or not, which I guess we'll have to find out.
Yeah, for sure. I think I touched on a little bit, but about the Nets, I think with everything that's been going on with how the Sixers ended the playoffs last year, Ben Simmons-ness, whatever it is. I think
whatever happened there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, who knows still? I mean, obviously, sports aside, I hope he's okay mentally, but I think a lot of people tend to forget that he was like a clear all-star before, and that Harden leaving and Simmons coming in, I think extremely benefits the Nets. And who knows, again, with this, maybe New York lifts the vaccine mandate. So we'll see if Kyrie can only play away games or only play, or also play home games. And so I think they're a huge wild card if Simmons plays or not. And obviously with the vaccine. So I think that team can pretty much upset any of the top teams, depending on where they finish. I know the Hawks and Marcus Smart single-handedly stopped the Hawks coming back the other night. But I think otherwise than from that, they're hot. That would be very much dependent on Trae Young and if he can play like last year in the playoffs. And even Toronto being kind of a smaller seed, I don't know. I just get this weird thing that they feel as a team. Nick Nurse wins, and I see at least the first round is very similar to like March Madness type thing where you just need a core 5 or 6, 7. We know Nick Nurse doesn't play deep benches. And so, I don't think they can make a crazy run at the playoffs. But I think for just the first round, if he gets his core 6 or 7 guys right, that could be a good matchup. If maybe they somehow can, maybe Cleveland climbs, they play Cleveland. Maybe Chicago falls off, someone gets hurt, they play Chicago, that type of thing.
Yeah, I would have to go with Dallas here. I think as crazy as this sounds, the Doncic and Brunson duo has been really good this year. Like surprisingly good how Brunson has been. So if they can control the games like they've been able to show this year, I think they can at least upset a team in the first round.
Mm-hmm. And so we got the play-in tournament too. Bunch of stuff still to be sorted out, but right now we would have Lakers Clippers in the play-in, which I think is very interesting. The West is giving us New Orleans too, and then we'll have Brooklyn in the play-in, which I'm super interested to see how they jockey down the stretch because they really have no incentive for home court. If Kyrie can't play, they almost want to play on the road. You obviously want to stay out of the play-in because that's dangerous, but I feel like Brooklyn almost wants like the 6th seed or something where they can start on the road. They'll have Kyrie for 2 games. maybe steal a game on the road, and then you get to go back home with the lead. So I think that's interesting. And the last couple of years, we've seen teams like the Clippers have sat players the last week of the season to basically adjust their matchup the last week of the season. So I'm super excited to see how everyone fights for seeding. And I was curious if you think there's a matchup that a team is going to try to avoid by losing games the last week of the season. And I think an example I was thinking of was the Jazz. If they were matched up with the Mavs, just because of what we've seen small guards do against Gobert in the past.
I think, first of all, I hate the play-in tournament, but I would be scared for Toronto if they drew Atlanta in that first play-in tournament. Now, I understand it's kind of a weird situation. They kind of have two lives, so maybe they can just focus on just winning one of those games and not necessarily worrying about just winning the first game and going all in on that. But I think they fare a lot better against either Charlotte or, this wanky Brooklyn Nets team. Who knows who they'll have on the court by then. Then against Atlanta, the way they're playing, I think it's an awful matchup for Toronto because I think right now Atlanta can just put up 140 points on the board. I'm not necessarily sure Toronto could keep up. I understand Toronto has a great defense, but it's not necessarily designed to fight this really young, really athletic, really spaced out Atlanta Hawks team. I know that's not technically like part of the core playoffs, but I think that'd be a really bad matchup. I don't know if Nick Nurse would be about that, but that's just an idea right now. Here's another one. Why in the world would Cleveland want to play Milwaukee in the first round? That would be a matchup right now. I'm sure they'd be like, here, Boston, you can have the 5 seed. You guys can go against the defending champs right now. Now, a lot can change. But as it is right now, I think Cleveland would benefit a lot from that 6 seed. Even going against Philly, I think that'd be a really interesting matchup because of how big Cleveland plays. You mentioned basically getting into foul trouble. Jarrett Allen is really good defensively. Now, Embiid is totally different, but
Allen gives Embiid more trouble than most bigs.
I totally agree. And they can give him some looks as well. Him and Mobley together can at least put up more of a fight than a lot of other bigs in the league can. So that would be a really interesting matchup. And although that sounds crazy, these new 76ers everyone loves, I think that would be a beneficial matchup for Cleveland. Then in the West, you mentioned Dallas. I agree with you. Here's another one. Golden State, like I mentioned, I think they don't want to play Denver at any cost necessary. Like right now, they would play probably Minnesota, assuming they can beat New Orleans in a playing game. I think they're much more content with that because if you have a top 2 seed in the West, you're pretty much guaranteed to go on to the second round as long as Paul George doesn't come back, as long as Anthony Davis is still probably hurt by then. We'll probably pick up another injury before the playoffs like he always does. I'm assuming Phoenix and Golden State, if they were to play Minnesota and the Clippers, they'd advance to the second round. So having a top 2 pick in the West is a premium. So if you're able to get that second pick, you really, really, really want that because then, especially after that, you're probably going to play, like a Memphis. I think teams would rather play Memphis than Dallas in a second round series just because Dallas has more experience and whatnot. So the second seed, whether it's losing games to become the second seed, winning games, whatever it is, the second seed, I think, is ultra important in the West.
I think it provides such an interesting conversation, and I think I'm glad it's one we're having because correct me if I'm wrong, and I can't remember what the team was, but I'm pretty sure it was a team tried to tank to get a better matchup, and then ended up losing that series. And I can't remember if it was the Clippers or
I feel like the Clippers and Dallas like tanked to match up with each other or something like that. Like the Clippers didn't want the Lakers and the Mavs didn't want someone else.
Yeah, and then it ended up not working out. And so I don't know. It's such an interesting conversation of like, do you play your own strengths? Do you try to play against the other team's weaknesses? I think it's still something that, I don't even know how you recommend that. Like, what as a coach is your thought process? You don't want to encourage losing, so then that's why they're like, here, we're going to give our younger guys more minutes. Let's rest our older guys, and so then maybe when it comes to the Warriors, like, are you going to rest Clay? Are you going to rest Curry and potentially drop out of that second seed? And so I don't know. I think it's so interesting. I think with it being everything closer this year, anything could happen. I think, I don't even know, like Washington, they were the 1 seed at one point in this year. And obviously now they're 11. And so they're barely trying to scrape in a play-in tournament. But like who knows, And so, and if Miami stays with that 1 seed, I don't hate if the Wizards can get out of the gets out of the playoff tournament. I don't hate the Wizards playing the Heat in the first round for the Wizards. And so I don't know. I think that with the Heat being really good defensively, that could take them all the way, or because they don't score that many points a game, that could, cause them problems. And so I don't know. I just think it's so interesting. You never really know. I agree about the West. I agree that top two, but even for the Warriors, they just got destroyed by Cat the other night. And so like he took them apart single-handedly. And so I think, when you're looking at the likes of Jokic, Cat, Gobert, and so on and so forth, I think if you're the Warriors, I don't even think there is a strategic way. You're going to have to play one of those good bigs eventually. And so you're better off trying to fix your guys now on guarding them than trying to like meticulously craft your way to the playoff,
Yeah, the NBA is just so matchup based now, like getting into switches, and you just want to dictate the style of play against your opponent. So just getting the wrong matchup like can end your season, and it has to some teams.
Yeah, and I almost feel like that like would mess with the mindset of the players. I don't know if I'm on the Warriors and I know we can't defend against bigs, and then Steve Kerr comes up to us, he's like, "All right, guys, we know we can't defend against the bigs, so let's lose these next 2 games, win this 1 game, so we can avoid playing the bigs." Eventually, when you come playing the bigs, you're like, "Well, our coach doesn't believe in us. Like, what are we going to do? Like, why are we even here?" And so I feel like that gets the mindset all wrong. You need to be going in like you can beat anybody. Draymond just step up. I don't know, something. Looney figure out how to play basketball. I don't know, something like that. But I think it messes with the mindset if you try to go too much into like losing for a playoff spot.
Yeah, they need Wiseman back in the worst way possible.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're still not sure what he can do, but the Warriors just need a body down there.
Yeah.
Somebody other than Kevin Looney.
Right, exactly. And I think even speaking of injuries, we don't know who's going to come back. Does Zion play again? The Pelicans are just in that 10th seed right now.
How fast can the Cavaliers get healthy too?
True, exactly. Yeah, we just touched on that.
Because they have 4 or 5 guards injured.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
And injuries are something that have decided like the last couple NBA championships. Like it's always an injury that breaks the championship. And people talk about, oh, it's luck, and like maybe it is, but like over and over again, like there's a big injury in the playoffs that like tilts the title one way or another.
I feel like that's what happened in the 2020 bubble with, when Giannis got hurt too, and Miami was able to make that finals run.
Mm-hmm. Even last year, like Harden and Kyrie got hurt, Anthony Davis got hurt, like Jamal Murray was hurt.
If AD didn't, no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying if AD didn't get hurt, I feel like Lakers could have made a run last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. They were looking great in that series. So one of the last things I want to get to is we've talked about some matchups teams want to avoid. Now I want to talk about matchups that like we all want to see. Like give me, if everything goes perfectly, like the best matchups for NBA fans this postseason is what?
I think you need Memphis Golden State eventually. However that comes to be, I think that'd be probably the top tier matchup. If it wasn't for this one, Philly, Brooklyn, please give me.
Yeah, that's the obvious one.
Yes.
I need that so bad. I think that would be the most fun thing in the entire world if that series was to come to fruition. I think some underrated ones that maybe aren't like those level, but I think that would be really fun. I think Dallas and Golden State would be a really fun series. Like I mentioned earlier, they played a great game the other night. And I feel like those two teams mesh well together as far as head to head. I think Brooklyn and Milwaukee in a rematch of last year would be pretty good. It was a great series last year. I think it'd be a lot of fun. The most underrated one, and the last one I'll mention, Chicago and Cleveland. Kind of a matchup of the two dark horse teams in the East this year, two really underrated teams that are playing right now. I just feel like that series would be a lot of fun. Could kind of be a toss-up. Obviously, Chicago would be favored in it, but I think it'd be a really competitive series, and just showcasing the younger talent in the NBA would be really nice to see. So those are my 4 or 5 that I mentioned. There's a lot of good potential playoff matchups this year, probably more than most seasons, and there's a good chance that a lot of them come to fruition, which is even more exciting.
One I'd like to see, too, is Milwaukee versus the Bulls, the two big threes going head to head, see how well they can defend Giannis and paint. Even his mid-range shot is looking pretty good this year too. I want to see how well, guys like Vucevic can stop him. How well Lonzo and Levine can play against who is it? Holiday and Middleton. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there.
Yeah, I think the big one is definitely Brooklyn, Philadelphia. I think that just would be so entertaining for everybody. One that I would love, I don't know how it's possible it would happen, but would be Boston, Atlanta. They've both teams in their season split as of last night, and both times or all the games, the home team has won the game. And so I think that always provides an interesting when they split in the regular season, like they know that they match up. The home team always wins. That provides an interesting dynamic in a 7-game series. I'd love to see Philadelphia and Milwaukee. I think Embiid and Giannis going at each other would be awesome. And I think, and you touched on it, Theo, for the Embiid Jokic in the regular season. I think if those two teams got to the finals, I think that a bunch of crazy things would have to be happening. Mm-hmm. But the two frontrunners, MVPs, going at it in the finals, and one of them probably being the finals MVP too, I think that'd be super entertaining.
Yeah, I love it. I wanted to talk about dream matchups, and that's definitely a dream matchup for the finals. Yeah. A couple other ones I was thinking of was we have Milwaukee and the Heat, they're in the 1 and the 4. They've matched up they matched up the last 2 years. The Heat won 4-1 in the bubble, and then the Bucks swept them last year. But now, so it was the Bucks that upgraded from Eric Bledsoe to Drew Holiday, but now the Heat have an upgrade. Now they have Kyle Lowry. They flipped PJ Tucker from Milwaukee to Miami. He's been a huge glue guy in a bunch of big playoff runs. So I think that's another good one. Another one I have is Utah versus Denver, a couple Western Conference teams, the best offensive center versus the best defensive center in Gobert. And then that was another great bubble series. We had like Mitchell and Jamal Murray going back and forth with 50-point games. If Jamal Murray can come back like for the playoffs, I would love that. It makes this Denver team so fun. But before we go, because we haven't discussed the Phoenix Suns today at all. And the Phoenix Suns have been by far the best team in the NBA this year, record-wise. So I just want to hear a little bit about the Suns. Are we sleeping on the Suns? Are they getting enough credit?
I think the Suns have gotten an ample amount of credit from the, media, at least kind of the nerd part of the media, maybe not the casual fans, but I think it's pretty clear that the Suns are head and shoulders better than anyone else in the NBA. Here's the issue, though. No one is saying that if Chris Paul isn't at least 90% healthy. Obviously, he's going to be out for a few more weeks with his hand injury. It's going to be really interesting to see how healthy he can get, even in a first-round matchup where the Suns will probably cakewalk at least in a 4, 5, 6-game series, right? If he gets hurt again, or if he has this lingering hand issue, last year I believe it was like his kind of back and shoulder. He had a few things going on. He even admitted that. If that happens again, I'm not necessarily sure they can get away with it again.
It always seems to happen to him in the playoffs, too.
Right? And I think the reason they can't necessarily get away with it this year, I think the West is a little more competitive, and I think it's always harder to do something twice than it is the first time because I think teams can kind of figure out a little bit of a way with it. If they play a team like Memphis, who plays at 1,000 miles per hour, a lot of their game is near the rim. We've seen Ayton get into some foul trouble sometimes. If he gets into foul trouble against the team that is number 1 in the league in floaters, Memphis has 100 more floaters than the second team in the league, which is the Spurs. It's ridiculous, right? If he gets into foul trouble, their backup is going to be Bismack Biyombo or JaVale McGee.
They gave up Jalen Smith for nothing.
Right.
I don't know. I don't understand what they did with Jalen Smith.
It's going to be really tough for those two guys to contain Memphis's mid-range attack, not to mention how they're able to stretch out a team as well with their shooters like Desmond Bane. And John Morant's been able to hit threes at a weirdly high rate for a guy who hasn't been a great shooter the last few years. Tyus Jones has probably been the most underrated player in the league this year. Dylan Brooks, the Anthony Melton, the list goes on and on. But regardless, a team like that's going to be really tough for them. So I'm going to say that with the caveat. I think the Suns are the best team in the league, but They need Chris Paul at least 90%. He needs to be as close to Chris Paul as possible. If he gets injured again, I simply do not think they have what it takes to go further, which is weird to say because the Suns have clearly been the best team in basketball. But what happened was Chris Paul also played in an amazing amount of games. I don't think he missed a game before he got hurt this past time with his hand injury. It's going to be really interesting to see. That's why I think the West is so fascinating. At the beginning of the year, everyone wanted you to believe this notion that it was only Phoenix and only Golden State that could get out of the West. But the last few weeks, we've seen Dallas go on this crazy one. We've seen Denver somehow stay afloat still. We've seen Memphis just continue to level up and level up. The middle of the West is a lot more interesting than anyone has given it credit for. And Utah's there, and no one trusts them, and they'll be out in like the first or second round. But they're there too.
Yeah, I think it's the Suns is so interesting because you said it. I don't think he missed a game either, and then he misses games and they lose to the Pelicans. And so, like, who knows? I think Ayton has taken a step up offensively. He's scoring a little bit better, but you're right. He has the foul trouble that would cause them a lot of problems. We know McCall Bridges is playing really well this year, and so I don't know. I think they might. I personally think they might be able to get away with it for 2 rounds. And, just pray for Chris Paul. I think it depends, again, on who they play. Against Memphis, yeah, they probably have some trouble. But if they go against someone like, I don't know, I think even if they play the Mavericks, I think that would be a little bit better for them since the Mavericks play so slow, like we've said. And so I don't think they'd have I don't think they could go all the way without Chris Paul. I think that's kind of a given. Mm-hmm. But I think they're, with what they've been doing the whole year, yes, they're clearly the best team. And so I think they would go a little bit farther than maybe people might think without Chris Paul.
I want to see too how well the Suns can play without Chris Paul. If they can get some of their younger guys, some of their depth players to step in and not fill the role completely, but kind of take some pressure off of Devontae Booker Devin Booker and sorry about that. And DeAndre Ayton too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, campaign was pretty good for them last year in the playoffs. Yeah. It's still weird for my brain to accept it whenever I see campaign giving the Suns good minutes, but he's kind of been doing this for a long time now, so I guess we should just get used to it. I think they do have the depth, but they're going to need Chris Paul to do anything significant.
I think we're hating on JaVale McGee a little bit too much. That dude's a stud.
JaVale McGee.
I know he's like the 5-time Shaqtin' MVP, but I think he's so underrated. I think the recent teams he's been on, I think the Warriors made a mistake in letting him go. I think the Suns are lucky to have him. I think he's a great second option. He's playing better. If they gave him more minutes, they would see what I'm talking about. And maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I just love him personally, and that's a little bit why. But I swear he's a solid backup. And so obviously he's not DeAndre Ayton. Obviously he's not a series winner. But I think he's a little slept on as an individual Suns player.
Is it that wild hair you like about JaVale or what?
Okay, no, the hair is not what I like about JaVale. Me and my mom are huge fans. Every time I'd watch my mom, she's like, JaVale, take that off. Shave it. It's bad. It's not a look. And so I think maybe that's his mojo at this point. But I know when he was on the Warriors and he was starting, he was putting up like 12 points, 8 boards, like solid minutes, solid efficiency rating, solid plus minus. And so I don't know. I think he's a lovable dude with a good locker room presence. When they went on that crazy run, I follow him on Instagram. And again, so maybe I'm biased, but he was posting all their after locker room, like their locker room celebrations, and it looked like a good environment. And I think we can talk about statistics all the time, but like that motivation, that momentum, that environment, that good locker room thing is something that's heavily underrated, especially in the playoffs. That's what the Heat excelled at, I think, on their bubble run. It was just they were having fun. It was a good time to be. And so I think that's underrated. And, maybe I'm a little more crazy for that, but I don't know. I think that can be something that the Suns take advantage of as well.
Mm-hmm. There's been a bunch
of the most love JaVale McGee's ever gotten. Entire NBA career.
We're going to clip it. Yeah. Send it to JaVale.
JaVale's going to be on the next podcast. I mean, I'm not sure he's getting too many offers. I might have to,
I'll text
I might have to send him a link next week.
I'll DM him on Instagram. We'll send him a clip.
Yeah, he might be available next week. We'll see.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Free JaVale. Come on.
We got anything else we need to hit on before we start talking about the Lakers or Knicks? Or
Do we
something
have to
doesn't
do
happen.
that? Like,
No, we
is that
do
in the
not.
contracts?
We spent the whole podcast last week talking about the Knicks and Lakers. Why we got to do it again?
I'll give you my 60-second Nick take. So it's 6:02 here on the Pacific Northwest. I'll give you the 6:03. I saw this coming from like 3 miles away. I mean, I have plenty of work to distinguish this, that I was right on the Knicks. If you thought that Julius Randle was going to be a top 20 player in the league 2 years in a row, I think you're criminally out of your mind. Just last year with the bubble, 2 years ago with the bubble, there was a lot of weird stuff that happened. And I think some of that trickled into last season, at least the first like 60, 70 games where a lot of these arenas still didn't have fans. So it wasn't necessarily the bubble, but it was kind of like bubbly. You know what I'm saying? It was a weird situation.
Shooting in an empty gym is different than shooting in a gym with fans.
It was carbonated, I'll say.
Especially
I'll put it
New
like
York
that.
fans.
Yeah. And I think for whatever reason, some guys played well, some guys didn't. Whatever, it doesn't matter. But the point stands that weird stuff, weird statistical anomalies happen. And Julius Randle just happened to be one of them. Okay. He's not that guy. You know, he's just not that guy. I don't think he's a borderline all-star anymore. I think he's like an above-average NBA player that dribbles with his left hand the entire freaking time up and down the court. It's ridiculous.
And he's such a negative
passer,
defensively.
and he's awful, just abysmal defensively. And RJ Barrett is like, you know, Salvation Army James Harden at this point. I don't know what else to say about him. And the entire roster as a whole is kind of underwhelming. You paid Evan Fournier like a pathetic amount of money. Everyone was trying to be like, no, that was a good deal. I was like, well, you just didn't watch him last year, clearly, because he was awful. As soon as he took off, that Orlando Magic blew and got into Boston, he was a terrible basketball player, and he's been terrible.
Same with Kemba,
well.
too.
I totally agree. They overpaid both of them, and now we're trying to talk ourselves into, is Isaiah quickly back? Are we sure he's back, guys? That's the conversation with the Knicks, and that's my minute on the Knicks is done. They're an embarrassing team. Tom Thibodeau.
My phone says 9:04.
I mean, Tom Thibodeau is
90
going to be that guy that, like, I love to be an assistant head coach. Like, I would love him as an assistant. But as soon as he's my head coach, I would just bury my head in sand. And that's kind of all I want to say about the Knicks, because they're so irrelevant. If they played anywhere else, if they were in Indiana, no one would say a word about them. No one would care about them. I mean, Indiana's lost like 28 clutch time games this year, which is unfathomable. No one talks about that. We talk about the Knicks because they're in Madison Square Garden. So that's my take on the Knicks right now. They're boring. They're not fun. They're not worthy of my breath. And I probably spent too much time talking about them just now.
Well, that's what I'm so confused about is they blew that crazy lead to the nobody Nets. Cam Thomas looked like a Hall of Famer for no reason.
Oh, is it a 23-point lead?
Now they're beating the Sixers right now and in Philadelphia. And that's just what I don't understand. I'm so confused. I've never liked Tom Thibodeau. I don't understand what his I can't imagine what he's saying in the timeout huddles that makes any sense. He's probably
that lead isn't going to last long in Philly.
Yeah, I mean, he's like, here, Julius Randle, go score, take a step back. Like, I don't know, like what is he even telling them to do? It doesn't look like he has any tactics of whatsoever.
Drawing up plays for Alec Burks.
Yeah, and then Alec Burks was awful running the point. They've tried to do that now that they benched Kemba, and it's terrible. And so then they come in, and then quickly has 12, something like that, and they're beating Philadelphia. And so I just don't understand that.
Theo, you mentioned the Lakers, who may be more insufferable than the Knicks at this point. I mean,
they're just a clown show. Like, they're just bad basketball.
I've seen rec teams.
How can you
play with
blow
more
so
effort,
many
man.
leads?
You can clip this. Put this on the freaking TikTok. I'm going to get close.
All right, yeah. I'll do it for you.
I've seen rec teams that play with more effort than the freaking Lakers do on a night in, night out basis. It's pathetic. There are so many times LeBron makes this stupid ass pass to the corner that it gets picked off, and everyone just stands around like there's no care in the world, that they're not in an NBA game right now, and they allow a fast break point. It's ridiculous. I'm not even a Lakers fan, and it pisses me off. Just as a fan of the sport of basketball, I think it's awful. And the fact that they blame Frank Vogel, who they think at this point is a millionaire or something, that can just whisk away money in front of everyone's face at any given term just so they can try. They have money. They already have money. They're all paid pretty well. It's the Lakers. They go way over the salary cap. These guys have played totally fine. The only one who pays or plays above their pay grade right now is Malik Monk. I'm stuttering because I'm so pissed off at this goddamn team. The fact that they think they're more deserving of what they are, that they need some kind of, motivation to just play simple basketball.
What was that
ridiculous.
Westbrook press conference?
Westbrook stinks, okay? I don't know why we keep pretending he doesn't. For like 4 years, people on Twitter, every time he has a decent game, stop picking on Russ. He's a Hall of Famer. He's a great point guard, guys. It's not fair. That's the Brody, all that crap with Russ. And guess
They're
what?
holding on to 2015, 2014 Westbrook.
He's not a top 100 player. If you have a problem with that, you don't watch enough. I don't know if he's a top 150 player. I mean, hell, I think I'd take Jalen Suggs tomorrow over Westbrook because at least I know he's going to try. At least I know he's going to have effort on the court. At least I know he's not going to try that stupid-ass bank shot that looks like a rifle went off the backboard. I mean, it's terrible. They play with no heart. They don't play with any sort of cohesion at all. It feels like LeBron's taking out the kids for lunch and they're just playing pickup basketball, and he'll get his 37, and that's totally fine, and then all the rest of them are there. If Davis doesn't come back, good luck. I mean, I'm sure he's going to come back eventually, and then he'll grab his ankle 4 times before the game ends, like he always does, because he leads the league in fake injuries. But I'd be scared of them in a playoff series only because they have LeBron and AD, and I think anything goes in a playoff series where, one tweak of the ankle, the Lakers could be right back in, and then maybe they'll try when the lights are on. Who knows? Maybe the Brody shows up finally, whatever. But I just don't think right now that this team is, like I said, really worth talking about. They have LeBron. Who's still a top 5 player in the league. That's cool. But outside of that, they're 27-34. I mean, it feels like every time I watch them, they blow a lead or they make this like hilarious comeback. Like Melo gets 2 buckets. And everyone's like, let's go. The Lakers are back. And then they lose.
LeBron's really the only reason why we're talking about him still.
They were down. I don't know if you watched this game yesterday. So we're recording this. It's Wednesday. The game Tuesday against Dallas. They were down by a lot. I don't remember the exact number. But I remember they were at least down by like over 17 points, right? They have this furious comeback. And I'm like, oh my God, they might actually win.
Up by 6.
And I could have heard First Take the next day. The Lakers tide has changed. They're back, man. Did you see what they just did to this Mavs team? This Mavs team that's been on a run lately. They're back, baby. And then they lost. It was like, oh, well, that was fun. They lost. You want to know why? Because they're not that talented. Malik Monk's probably the second best player on this team right now. Right now, without Davis, it's probably Malik Monk. It's not Westbrook. I mean, hell, we're about 2 weeks away from a THT package for Mo Wagner. I don't even know what they're going to do with that guy anymore.
They should have taken that Kyle Lowry deal when they had the chance.
They're like, oh, do you want the 2027 first round pick too? No,
that's all they have. Their only asset is
everything else is gone.
First round pick 5 years from now. They throw the ball out of bounds at least 2 times a quarter, when they do not need to at all. And you're saying they need to find some type of motivation. You're in the 10 seed. That's not motivating you to get out of the 10 seed.
THT had this play last night. It was a 2-on-1. It was, I think it was Luka, I believe was the defender. And it was THT and Westbrook. And he tried to throw an alley-oop to Westbrook. And he, instead of throwing the ball up, he threw it like a softball pitcher just forward. He, underhand forward, tossed it into the crowd. That's the Lakers season in a nutshell, man. If there was any video of anything, it's THT trying to throw an alley-oop and just chucking it into the crowd. It was abysmal. This team is so unlikable. It's honestly incredible. Obviously, we don't like actual teams. You're a Celtics fan. You might not like the Knicks and the Lakers. You're a Bulls fan. You might not like the Cavs and the Bucks, whatever. But just as far as pure basketball purist who has really no rooting interest in anything, you just like watching games, the Lakers may be the worst team in the league.
Here's the thing:
I think the Pistons try harder, man. Seriously,
I loved role player Carmelo Anthony. I was never a Melo guy, but Portland Melo, there was something about him I always rooted for him. I was when he was making shots, I was putting the 3 fingers to my head. I love Portland Melo, and the Lakers have just taken all of the fun out of role player Melo, and now he has way too much responsibility again. And it's just it's not fun.
I feel bad for the announcers Harlan and Brian Anderson, those two, because the Lakers are always on TNT. Those 2 guys get stuck with the fact they have to call this shit show. And they're just making shit up half the time. It's the middle of the third quarter, Melo gets a bucket. They're like, well, that's Melo, man. Melo's out here. Melo's doing Melo. Can the Lakers come back? No, that's the answer to most of the questions they ask. Is Russ underrated right now? Russ having a sneaky good game, and then he has 4 more turnovers to end the game. It's just
and 5 more missed threes.
So much you can say about a 27-34 abysmal team that was the clear title favorites last year when they entered the playoffs. Obviously, injuries derailed that, but how the turnstable, right? Because in a 12-month span, they became one of the most intriguing teams to watch. They were actually, despite, their makeup and whatever, they were genuinely a somewhat fun team last year, I would say. This year, I mean, night and day. And who knows? Maybe this is just the start of LeBron becoming a Piston with Bronny. I don't know. But it's going to be interesting to see how longer he stays with this, because clutch sports are basically a cult at this point. And they're like, no, LeBron wants to stay. We promise. I'm not so sure about that. We'll see how much longer this LeBron and La La Land experience continues. I don't know where he'd go.
2 years.
Yeah, I don't know where he'd go. If he leaves before Bronny, I don't think Cleveland would necessarily be like, yeah, we want you back, Bron. I don't know how that would go. Miami maybe to team up with his buddies.
Oh
again.
God, did you see that Colin Coward trade scenario? That was awful.
It just feels like the NBA right now has so many good things going for it, but you always have those annoying teams that aren't in the playoff picture that you got to talk about. And I'm glad you brought him up, Theo, because I don't want to talk about him again for like a really long time. Like, I understand
we'll talk about it next week.
Yeah, I'm sure we will. I'm sure LeBron will like stub his toe and say something about it, but whatever. Like, I mean, I feel like watching a Kings game half the time more than watching a Lakers game. It's bad. I mean, if you look at the worst team in the league, I think it's Houston by like a country mile. I understand that they're tied for the worst record with Detroit and Orlando. I genuinely don't know how Orlando's 15-47. Like, I feel like they're in a lot of games. Like, they're not that bad, in my opinion. I feel like that speaks to just kind of how good the NBA is in total. Houston's abysmal. But as far as like what team I want to watch the least next, the Lakers got to be up there. I mean, they don't try. Take LeBron off the team. It's just pathetic. The NBA is in a good place, though. After all that, I just wanted to say the NBA is in a good place because those kind of teams are finally ending. LeBron's almost out of this place. And then we won't have to talk about the Lakers being 27. I don't know who's going to be the next guy. Who's going to be the next guy we talk about way too much on a bad team? I don't know. Think about that one for a sec. Who's going to be the next guy? Maybe Trae Young.
LaMelo Ball.
LaMelo, maybe. LaMelo, Trae will probably be an East guy because I think the East is getting really good and there's a lot of talent up and down the East. One of those guys, maybe. I just don't think Memphis is going to be bad enough in the next coming years. But
they hit on all their draft picks, though. Like Memphis is just going to keep getting better, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. The only one I'm a little confused about, I don't know how well Zaire is going to develop. I mean, he has flashes here and there. Mm-hmm. He's going to be really important for them, I think, in a playoff series. But before we end this, LeBron predictions. What team does he end his career with? I really want this. Like, I want to know what everyone genuinely thinks. You genuinely think it's going to be the Magic. Like, so, Bryce, when you say that, you think it's going to be like a bad team that drafts Bronny to get LeBron. That's kind of where you're going.
It's going to be someone in the top 5 that drafts Bronny just so they can have one shot at LeBron James in a playoff.
But then if you're a team drafting in the top 5, like, what is that getting you? Like, your roster was bad enough to draft in the top 5, and then are you really going to waste the pick for one season of LeBron? Like, how much is 40-year-old LeBron going to change?
The only scenario I could think of
is it's really hard to
the only scenario I could think of bouncing off Theo's question would be like the Warriors just coming off a top 5 pick a few years ago where they clearly weren't one of the worst teams in the league. They just had injuries.
Yeah.
So if a similar situation were to arise where a good team just got hurt and they were able to add LeBron to their already good core, that'd be interesting. To answer my own question, I don't know why. I have a weird feeling he's going to Miami. I have a weird feeling that they're going to set up something, some backdoor agreement where he's able to play his last few years. I'm pretty sure like a brunt of Bronny's childhood was in Miami. I'm almost positive about that. So I have a weird feeling that's
just as long as we don't have to trade Lakers half our future.
He said he's willing to take a minimum contract to play with them. So
LeBron's buddy James Jones is the GM in Phoenix too. That's another one I'd throw out there.
Yeah,
imagine LeBron, Carmelo, and Chris Paul playing in Phoenix.
Oh God!
Like the West Coast retirement home. That'd be fun.
I think that's the big question: is where do you know what pick do you start thinking? Okay, we can draft Bronny and get LeBron here. Like I would agree, it has to be one of those teams. It has to be like, the maybe the Thunder get really good and they can use one of
Oh,
their.
I wanted to say that so bad. I
Yeah,
think
One
that'd
of
be
their
the most
50
fun.
draft picks.
because
I
exactly
think that'd be the
have,
most fun by far. Is
I
the
agree.
Thunder take him?
I agree because they have the, even if it misses and even if it's bad, they still had 14 other picks in the
Yeah,
draft.
they'll have so many other young players they can
Exactly.
throw in on
So it won't
Bronny.
matter. So I think the Thunder are the number one
I like that.
destination that they can
They still have
afford
a
to
young
be that
core,
higher
too.
up. Exactly. And so LeBron
That
would be
they can
great
fall
for that
back
young
on.
core. I
Dude,
think
40-year-old LeBron in an OKC jersey is just making me laugh, though. It's like seeing,
Shea's already great right now. Imagine in a couple years and he gets LeBron. Like, I think that's incredible. And so I'm going with the Thunder.
Josh Giddey's damn good,
God.
too. Like,
Right, exactly.
Shea, Giddey, and Braun, the new big three.
So Lou Dort, let's go.
You want to know what's funny too? I don't know if you guys saw this. He just complimented Sam Presti a few weeks ago, and everyone talks about how LeBron doesn't do things without, merit. Like he's always this calculated guy. If he compliments you, it's for a reason. So was Braun complimenting Presti? Maybe use that 54th pick on Bronny, because here's the other thing too. Bronny was a 5-star recruit. He's now a 4-star recruit. So he's already gone down in star rankings. I'm not going to shit on a 17-year-old right now, but who knows if he can make the league, right? That's all I'm saying. Like, it feels like it's this conclusion already. Oh, Bronny's in the league. Like, right now it feels like his best chance of becoming in the league is the fact that LeBron's saying he'll go to the franchise that drafts them. So maybe we're kind of overthinking this. Maybe it's not even going to be a first-round pick. Maybe it'll be a second-round pick, middle to late second round, where someone takes a flyer on him. Because who knows how much people care about 40-year-old LeBron James. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's still phenomenal right now, but even if he's like, let's say I don't know, not an all-star player, but pretty damn close. If he's kind of like Julius Randle, not to come full circle, but Julius Randle tier of a player by then, right? Are you really going to waste like a 30th pick on that when, these drafts become deeper and deeper? That's a lot of where the draft and stash guys come from. A lot of those draft and stash guys have become better as the years go on. So are you really going to waste the 30th pick on Bronny just to have a year of LeBron? So if the Thunder in one of their 8 second-round picks take Bronny, I think that makes a hell of a lot more sense than the team in the top 5 going, oh, we need a year of LeBron. You know what I'm saying? It just makes more sense in my head.
Well, even 30, the Bulls got Dosunmu at 52. And
exactly,
so
yeah.
Even then, like, are you really? I mean, again, we don't want to hit on 17-year-old, but like, Dosunmu was a stud at Illinois, somehow fell to 52, and now.
Could you imagine if like Bronny, though, averaging like 6 points a game, got picked ahead of him? Like,
like exactly. That's like what? Yeah, so I don't even 30. I think it's even 50 something. I mean, Isaiah Thomas, he was 60. So like that type of thing. Like it's
Luka Garza was literally the player of the year in college basketball. He got picked in the 50s. I mean, obviously not a great prospect, but Jericho Sims, who we talked about earlier, who's like in the Knicks rotation, 58th. Like these guys play nowadays. Sharif Cooper, who a lot of guys think is going to be like an interesting flyer as the years come on, who's in the G League for the Hawks, 48th.
Where did Jokic get picked? Was he in the 40s? Like the reigning MVP?
There was a Taco Bell commercial going on when Jokic got picked. That's how little they cared about him.
He didn't get shown on TV. Yeah.
Kessler Edwards, who was in the Nets rotation for a while, 44th. These guys play nowadays. Like this isn't a few years ago where these guys aren't getting played. Like this is happening now. Jeremiah Robinson Earl, who's like been a weirdly good player this year. Like maybe good's a little bit of a stretch, but weirdly solid NBA player. I'll give him that. 32nd pick. Like these guys play. Cam Thomas led the NCAA in scoring last year, 27th.
Herb Jones
Bronny,
was in the 30s.
Yeah, but Bronny averaging like 15 points a game at Sierra Canyon probably isn't going to cut it. Now, we've talked about this a few times before, maybe not here, but at least in our Discord and amongst each other. It's nearly impossible. It's not nearly, it is, to find Sierra Canyon stats that aren't like one game off. Like you can't see what he's averaging. The coach of Sierra Canyon has come out saying like he doesn't want it, and I understand why, but we don't even know what the hell this guy's averaging per game. Like we don't even know his stats, what he's shooting. He has those one-off games that you maybe see on ESPN or like a Ball is Life or whatever, but he's only gone down in star rankings and he's only gone down the board. He's probably not going to be a top 40 player in his class. And if his name wasn't Bronny Jr., it'd be interesting to see where he'd be ranked, not to, put more pressure on the kid. But obviously, name value is going to help him a little bit. Even if it's like 5 to 6 ranking, it's still going to help him that he's LeBron's son. I just feel like it's one of those things that, like, we're talking about it now because it's funny. In 2 years, is it even going to be like the end of a wavelength? Like, is it even be worth talking about in such small capacity? Probably not. Honestly, like, probably not. It is fun now, though. Like, I enjoyed everyone's reaction.
I mean, like, Bronny Jr. is still so small, but he has LeBron's genetics. Like, at some point, is he just going to become like a huge muscular freak? Yeah.
I haven't watched like a ton of like film on him or whatever, but I've seen like a weird amount on the other one, Bryce. I think Bryce is actually going to be pretty damn good. You can write this one down.
I just saw some clips of him the other day. Yeah.
I think he's really good, man. I don't know. I never was like, wow, Bronny's crazy. But I was watching Bryce a little bit. I was like, this kid's pretty good. I can't wait for Bryce and Deuce Tatum and 47-year-old Bron to team up. I feel like that's going to be a lot of fun. On OKC, of course, with SGA.
Right,
like,
exactly.
Still and the captain of the team.
All right, anything else we need to get to? I think we hit it all.
I think we've literally hit every sector of the world. We somehow started with like MVP candidates and ended up with Bryce James. So I feel like it's really come.
We're set for next few years now.
For TikTok.
Nailed it. All right, yeah, check us out. Instagram, TikTok, the Sports Wave. Podcast should be on Apple Podcasts, YouTube. Check out the articles on our website. Any parting words?
Man, I hope Ja scores 50 again because that was the most fun thing in the last few weeks.
With that alley-oop X talked about, I had a better alley-oop in my intramural basketball game than that one that Taylor Horton Tucker threw. So I just want to touch on that before we head it out.
All right, let the people know.
Exactly.